In our last episode, Abdülmecid had shown that even the sick man of Europe could act with moral authority, sending grain and funds across oceans to starving Irish children. Yet the empire that could feed others could not feed itself. Victory in the Crimean War had been purchased with borrowed soldiers, foreign loans, and relentless dependence, and now the cost of survival was about to escalate. This is road to destruction, the world wars. Even as the cannons fell silent and the treaties were signed in Paris, the vultures circled. European banks poured into Istanbul, offering loans for railways, telegraphs, and modern ministries. At first, these were hailed as instruments of progress. The Rumelia Railway Company laid its first tracks, telegraph lines blinked across the empire, ministries were rebuilt with European expertise. But every contract, every copper wire, every rail tie was tied to a foreign ledger. Creditors demanded interest, advisors demanded oversight, and with each payment, Ottoman sovereignty slipped further from the Sultan's hands. Galata bankers, men like Isaac Mendes and other European-affiliated houses, became the hidden engines of empire. Baring brothers in London financed steamships. Parisian firms underwrote railways and ports. Every new project came with invisible strings. Ottoman officials discovered that ministries staffed by European advisors now dictated policy as often as Istanbul did. Reform was no longer a matter of choice. It was a debt-driven choreography written in Paris, London, and Vienna, performed in the palaces and ports of the Ottoman Empire. With each successive loan, the empire mortgaged not just its present, but its future. Revenues from provincial taxes, collected from Anatolia, Rumelia, and the Levant, were earmarked to satisfy European creditors, leaving local administrators scrambling to fund roads, garrisons, and relief for famine or unrest. Villages saw levies rise, harvests shrink under the weight of debt, and governors whispered that the empire's lifeblood had been pledged abroad before it could serve its own people. Every reform, every telegraph, every steamship carried a hidden cost. The very provinces that sustained the empire were now underwriting its subservience. Abdülmecid watched as modernization became bondage. Telegraphs linked Istanbul to the provinces, but each message carried the eyes of foreign engineers and creditors. Railways spread toward the interior, carrying goods, armies and observers alike. Infrastructure meant to strengthen the empire now mapped its dependencies. The Sultan realized painfully that while the empire appeared to grow, its true strength was being quietly drained. And then came the Suez. By 1859, plans were already underway to dig a canal linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, a waterway that promised to transform global trade. Europe's engineers and financiers loomed over the project, their contracts and loans shaping every mile of progress. All infrastructure, from ports to railways, became part of a larger design, a quiet claim on the empire's arteries long before a single ship sailed the Suez. The Suez would not just shorten voyages, it would crystallize Ottoman dependency, a monument to borrowed power, built with the empire's own consent. Abdülmecid, who had once believed in the promise of reform, now faced the cold calculus of survival. Every telegraph, rail, and ministry expansion reminded him that sovereignty could be mortgaged as easily as debt. Every European credit, however well-intentioned, edged the empire closer to a reality where modernity would arrive dressed in chains. The empire was modern on paper, but weakened at its core. Every new project was a rehearsal for foreign control, every borrowed lira a testament to Europe's foresight and the Sultan's constrained authority. In this new age of debt, the Sultan remained the master in name only. European banks dictated the rhythm of treasury payments, foreign advisors shaped policy, and Istanbul's coffers emptied to satisfy interests that enriched distant capitals. Abdulmajid understood that survival was temporary and the empire's dependence was permanent. His realm had been saved from collapse once, but now the price of life was bondage. The Suez loomed not as a marvel, but as a reckoning. Every stone, every canal contract, every foreign engineer at work on the banks whispered the same truth. Europe had planned for this, and the empire's modernity had been the vehicle for its own containment. The Ottoman Empire could no longer claim independence. Even triumph in reform had become a gilded cage. In our next episode, the dream fades. Abdulmajid's final years, the empire's pulse slows. Reform stalls, corruption seeps into every corner of the administration, and the Sultan, once bold and ambitious, grows sick, withdrawn and haunted by the compromises his reign demanded. Tanzimat, the grand vision of progress, now feels like a costume worn for Europe's applause rather than a tool for his own people. Abdulmajid approaches the end of his life. The empire stands more centralized, more modern, and yet more dependent than ever. And waiting in the shadows, his successor Abdul-Aziz readies a harder, colder age, one where the lessons of borrowed power and gilded sovereignty will be tested anew. This is Road to Destruction, the World Wars.